Hey friends, thanks for joining us. Another tropical update here. Boy, it's been a busy past couple of days. It's been a busy past couple of months. Hurricane season in full swing here, and we are just on the upward trend here into the busier part of the season. So Marco showing us, giving us a little break today, deteriorating as it approached land today, and so it's just hanging on to that tropical storm status. And Laura, on the other hand, is going to be our next contender here as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, I'm sure you've heard by now, we've been talking about this for several days, that Laura is expected to intensify as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll be talking about what we can expect with what we know so far for that storm here in a second, but I want to end things out with Marco. So let's go there first to our tropical tracker and show you what is going on with these storms. You can see in the MyRadar app here, we have our hurricane tracker on that shows both storms and their paths. So that's Laura down here by the Caribbean. It's not in the Gulf of Mexico yet. It is still trying to clear the island of Cuba, actually the Isle of Youth, a smaller island just south of Cuba. And so this is the newest projected path that came out of the National Hurricane Center at 5 p.m. We'll talk more about that, but I want to bring your attention to what is left of Marco. It's not even very obvious here on the radar. A lot of shear in the upper level, just taking that moisture off into the panhandle of Florida and Alabama, all the way up through the southeast. This rain then extends even into portions of the Carolinas, just taking that moisture and running with it out to the east coast. So that's pretty much what Marco has done for folks here, other than cause some pretty serious conditions out on the Gulf Coast waters there. But we'll go to our WSI graphics now and show you the path of whatever is left of Marco. I'm not sure there's going to be many more advisories for this storm as we head on through the rest of tonight. Our tropical tracker here showing you that Marco is expected to continue moving onshore here. What's left of a center hasn't really come onshore. I mean, that tip of the boot that comes out Grand Isle, that's kind of where the center circulation at the surface is, and it's going to make this left turn on land here. Its maximum sustained winds were at 40 miles per hour. Tropical storms begin when maximum sustained winds are at 39 miles per hour. So not a whole lot of punch left to this storm, but still bring very heavy rainfall to folks across the southeast, as we just saw on the radar. And as you can see in this infrared imagery, these bright colors, those are thunderstorms. The darker shades of red showing you the more intense thunderstorms. So Florida has got quite a bit of rain today, and in through parts of Alabama and Georgia as well. So things staying very dry on the western side of the storm here. That's a trend that'll continue going on into tonight as whatever is left of Marco makes this left turn through Louisiana and kind of fizzling out into Texas. It's actually going to be absorbed by an upper level feature, a low pressure system, a trough that kind of helped steer the storm. So all of these features are what we'll be talking about in this update to give you kind of an idea of what is going on with these two systems, and soon to just be one system left. So first, let's get caught up on those watches and warnings that are associated with Laura. There are no watches and warnings associated with Marco. Those were canceled a bit earlier this afternoon. So all the colorful things you're going to see on this screen here are solely associated with Laura. So this purple color here is a tropical storm warning that's still in effect for the island of Cuba and in effect for the island of Youth, which is the smaller little island right here to the south of Cuba. Notice the middle to lower Keys and the Dry Tortugas still in a tropical storm warning. As Laura begins to clear its way into the Gulf of Mexico, these will eventually be allowed to relax. But we've been getting a lot of rain shooting towards the northeast of this storm, and it's helped pump a lot of moisture. In addition to what's coming from Marco, a lot of moisture being somewhat surged up from Laura into the peninsula of Florida. So very rainy day for folks along the coastline here. And as Laura the Gulf of Mexico here into the next couple of days, we will see conditions all along the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico become somewhat poor for folks all the way from the southwestern portions of Florida, wrapping around the Big Bend into the Panhandle and eventually out to the coastal bend of Texas. So the Gulf of Mexico is a relatively small basin when compared to the size of these storms. So it really goes to show how much of an impact it can have for folks all along the Gulf Coast of the U.S. But getting back to these watches and warnings, the new ones issued for the northern Gulf Coast. So we had a short break between the time that the advisories for Marco were canceled That was at the 2 p.m. advisory Eastern time. And then at the 5 o'clock advisory, National Hurricane Center reissuing advisories for many of the same places because we don't have all that much time before Laura now comes into play and threatens folks here along the Gulf Coast. So hurricane watch is this pink color you see here that spans from Louisiana all the way back into Texas, including Galveston Bay. So folks here, you could see some hurricane conditions coming into play as we head into the next 36 to 48 hours, and we'll time that out here for you in a moment. But tropical storm watch is in effect for those folks who are to the east and to the west of this warning area. So that's going to include Grand Isle going back to about Morgan City, and then on the other side of the hurricane watch, that's an area that extends out just a bit to the southwest of Galveston. So these areas will need to be on guard and watch this forecast very closely as Laura makes its way into the basin. There's a couple of things at play. Still nothing set in stone. These advisories are not set in stone. They will continue to change as the storm emerges into the Gulf of Mexico and begins to intensify, because the storm's intensity does impact its track, and its track impacts its intensity. That's what makes these systems so fun to forecast for. And yeah, there's a hint of sarcasm in that. So these are the current advisories that are in effect, and they're associated with Laura. Again, no advisories are in effect for Marco. Something that Marco has been doing that I want to bring back to the MyRadar app here, and I'll remove the hurricane tracker cone so you can see this a bit better. We do have some watches and warnings for folks in Florida and along the Alabama coastline here. So those colors that you see here in red and purple, those are the hurricane advisories, hurricane watches and tropical storm watches that we just talked about. You see here along the Louisiana and Texas coastlines. But focusing in on this precipitation here, this rain that's coming in off the Gulf of Mexico on the coast of Florida, it's hard to see here because we have a plethora of flood advisories, flood watches and warnings for folks here. But there's also a tornado watch in effect for folks along the coastline of the Florida Panhandle, and that extends a bit northward into southern Georgia and also parts of southern Alabama. So folks here under a tornado watch until this evening, midnight Eastern time, 11 p.m. Central for these areas. So you can track this along with us in your MyRadar app. This is simply because as these storms come on shore, it's going to these storms move, and there's a rotation in the upper part of the atmosphere. So we're not looking at supercell kinds of tornadoes, but what we would see is some rotation that could cause a quick spin up, and that's not uncommon to see as tropical systems near the coastline. So that is something that we are watching for here. I'm going to bring you back to our WSI graphics to show you the current radar here and get some of those watches and warnings out of the way. Just a moment as I bring that up here. It's been an active day, and it really began last night. Special marine warnings were aplenty off the coast of the Florida Panhandle as we were dealing with some of these bands coming on shore. So it kept the National Weather Service office in Tallahassee very busy last night, but thankfully there really hasn't been much going on in addition to the very heavy rainfall and at times gusty winds that folks along the Panhandle here have been dealing with. So we'll go ahead and bring up our radar. It is loading. Give me just a moment. All right, and now we're going to come back to the area in question here along the Gulf Coast. Notice, going back to Texas, this is a bit of ground clutter that you see near Galveston, but we have had some showers off the coast of the Big Bend of Texas here, the coastal bend from Corpus Christi, Port Lavaca. Seen a couple showers off the coast. Nothing too terrible there, nothing severe, but some heavy downpours at times because of this troughing that is trying to keep Marco pinned where it is on the coast. But eventually going to absorb that and we won't have to deal with it much longer. But these are some of the storms. Look at these deeper reds that you see here in the Big Bend of Florida. Some of those have been dumping heavy rainfall, frequent lightning at times. And so with that, we have seen the concern that there may be some tornadoes later on tonight. I'm going to show you here, since it might be a little bit easier to see on our WSI radar here, the watch box that is associated with that tornado watch. Again, going until midnight Eastern time, 11 p.m. Central time. I'll try to pull that up for you here in a moment. It would help if I had the right radar on. Here we go. There it is. It's loading, folks. Technical difficulty. So that red box that you see there, that is the tornado watch box that is in effect for folks along the Florida Panhandle into southern Georgia and just that southeastern tip of Alabama. So that is the concern, where we could see some rotation as these bands spiral onshore and could cause some problems for folks. So far, we haven't really seen much in terms of rotation. So great news so far, but you can see those storms moving onshore. We have some surfline camera we'd like to share with you, starting out with Pensacola Beach, where conditions have been just flat out poor here. They've closed the waters to swimmers here. Double red flags at the beach, so not the best day. Folks can still walk on the beach here if you would like to be under a bunch of rain, but not a day for folks who want to be out there swimming. Very big concern of rip currents all along this part of the Gulf Coast, so it's been a problem. And you can see we've had some passing showers, but thankfully it looks like we've got a little bit of a break there. Notice some of the white caps there on the beach, so it's been not the best day out there. We can take you now to Panama City Beach, where this is a bit further to the east along the Florida Panhandle, where we've had a couple more passing showers too, but it looks like right now we're getting a little bit of a break. But yeah, it has been a pretty rough day for folks here in the Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi panhandles, to say the least. There we go. We got our Panama City camera up there. It looks like we still have some sea spray on the camera. The beach not looking too friendly there. Water's very choppy, and sometimes that can be deceiving as rip currents come in and they go out. It's really that undertow under the water that really tends to be the dangerous aspect of that. So this is why it's so important to not venture out into those waters when we have these systems causing these conditions out on the beach, because it's just so dangerous. You can't always see the threat that lies there in the water. So we're going to take you a little bit further down the Florida coastline here. We're going to head now to the jetties out at Venice Beach, Florida. This is on the southwest coast there, and try to show you the conditions there. Things were pretty choppy, and this is closer to where Laura is, obviously, a little further south. So it looks like a pretty nice beach day, but you probably wouldn't want to be caught up in those waters. We saw somebody on a kayak a couple hours ago trying to, oh, they might still be out there. See some surfers in the water. But we had some folks out there trying to take advantage of the rough surf. It's a risk that you take when you want to enjoy those water sports, I suppose. But yeah, things not looking so great on the western coastline of Florida. We could take you to one more place here out on the opposite end of the Gulf of Mexico, heading now to Corpus Christi, I believe this is. Is this where we're heading to now, Matt? He's manning the controls back there, giving Damien a little bit of a break, so doing a great job out there. Thanks for helping out. This is Corpus Christi, Texas. So sunshine here. Fairly dry conditions. We had a couple passing showers in the coastal bend of Texas, but things dry right now. This is a live look at Corpus Christi Beach. Thanks to our partners at Surfline for sharing this view with us. But notice, as the sea comes in, it's pretty rough there too. I don't think there is a calm wave here along the Gulf Coast of the U.S. anywhere, whether you're going from Florida out around to Texas. And here's our last stop on the Surfline cameras. We're going to take you out to Matagorda. This is a little bit further north on the coastline of Texas, and so looks pretty sunny out there too. Looks like we've got a nice day, but yeah, waves bigger here, and that'll be the case. These waves are going to continue to be more rough as we head on through the next several hours and Laura makes its approach into the Gulf of Mexico. If you were watching our live yesterday, I made the comparison that when these systems roll through the Gulf of Mexico, it affects everybody along the Gulf Coast, because it's like somebody doing a cannonball at the opposite end of the swimming pool that you're in. You're going to know somebody jumped in. It creates those turbulent waves. So definitely an impact for everyone here. And just want to remind you, you're going to want to stay out of the waters. Those choppy waves, rough surf, rip currents, a problem for folks all along the Gulf Coast, not just immediately where we expect these systems to come on through, whether it be Marco or now impending Laura as it approaches the Gulf Coast. I'm going to take you back to our WSI graphics. We're going to look some more at these storms rolling on shore to the Florida Panhandle here. We've got our tornado watch box up here. It's that rectangle you see there in red, and some of these storms have been moving in a northerly fashion, kind of riding along the I-75 corridor here, or just to the west of it. And we've seen lots of moisture coming up. Earlier today, we had some coming up on the east and middle side of the Florida Peninsula, but most of this pinned towards the west side now. We have high pressure building in from the east coast of the U.S. So building this way, and high pressure tends to give us more calm, stable weather. But when it's in the upper levels of the atmosphere, also helps to steer these tropical systems. So for that reason, things beginning to dry out a little more along the eastern coastline of Florida, but on the west side, pumping in some of the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, from both Marco on the panhandle side of Florida, and from Florida, especially down in southwest Florida. So let's actually get down to ground level and look at some of these storms. They're not very tall, which is good news. We've got high pressure kind of squashing things, not letting these thunderstorms balloon into these very big storms, but sitting at about 30,000 feet for storm tops. So that gives us an idea to some of the storms that we see here. Some very heavy rainfall being reported at times, tropical downpours with these systems as they roll across the panhandle of Florida, eventually moving into southern Georgia and southern Alabama. So as they do so, that movement has a bit of rotation to it, and for that reason, we have that tornado watch in effect until tonight. So something to watch out for. It's always a concern when we have these tropical systems approaching land because of their spinning nature. So it's not out of the ordinary to have that, but just something to be aware of. I know the National Weather Service offices here will be working extra shifts I believe they're on 12-hour shifts now all along the Gulf Coast to try to help in advance prepare for some of these systems that are going to be moving through. Let's move over to this cell over here that looks to be a bit bigger, kind of on the Florida-Georgia border here, where 75 heads on into Georgia, so by Jennings and into Valdosta. So it looks like we're going to get some heavy rainfall here. And once again, we'll come down and look at this kind of at a ground level and see these thunderstorms a little bit taller, maybe 35,000 feet for some of them. So dumping very heavy rain. Not likely to see too much lightning out of these thunderstorms moving onshore, but at around 35,000 feet, we very well could be getting a couple rumbles of thunder through some of these thunderstorms here. So something to keep in mind. You're going to want to stay inside, let these storms pass. It's been a rainy day for many folks in this particular area of the Gulf Coast. Unfortunately, they've been the ones getting the brunt of whatever Marco has brought on shore in terms of rain. And we've had a lot of rain over these same areas the past couple of days because that moisture has just been surging to the northeast over these areas. So that is the case here. Let's see if we can find any rotation here on the radar. It looks like in relation to the radar, not too many areas of concern. We got a little bit of the red showing winds going away from the radar, green into the radar. So maybe a little bit here just west of Madison and east of Monticello. This is in the Tallahassee area, but nothing that shows much concern here across. What I'm looking at is right here in particular. Pretty benign. Doesn't look like we have much going on, but some of these thunderstorms could be more severe going on into tonight. So this is something that we'll continue to monitor through the rest of the evening. And another great reason to have your MyRadar app handy with your location settings on. You'll get prompted and alerted whenever severe weather is nearby or in your area. Even the rain alerts. You want to know if it's a good time to head out maybe to the grocery store between showers. That's some of the great benefits of having our app. We'll do those things. It will help keep you dry between these showers moving onshore, but best to stay home. Even though these storms may not seem very severe, let them pass on by. Just ride the evening out at home if you can, and just let all this pass. So let's go back again to look at the path of Laura here. Show you what the anticipated track is for this storm, because that's been a big talk here going on into the past, I'd say, about 12 hours as we've watched this storm kind of make its way up the coastline of Cuba, the western coast there. It has managed to not be severely impacted by the landmass of Cuba. It has kept its center mostly over the water just south of Cuba, and so that has allowed it not only to maintain its intensity, but we have seen some intensification at times. This is sitting at 60 mile an hour maximum sustained winds as of the 5 o'clock Eastern advisory. So hurricanes begin at 74 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. And with that, Laura's definitely holding her own here. Along the path, expect as the system moves into those warm Gulf of Mexico waters, it will increase to 70 miles per hour by tomorrow afternoon and reach hurricane status. I think we could see Laura become a hurricane sometime tonight into the overnight. So if it's not by the 11 p.m. advisory tonight, then I think certainly as the system clears Cuba and we head into tomorrow morning 5 a.m. advisory, I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see Laura become a hurricane by then. So then as it traverses the Gulf of Mexico, those warm waters, not a lot going on in the upper atmosphere to kind of fight this storm. So it looks like we'll have good fuel with the warm waters, very low shear, so great exhaust up top as well. That's going to let this storm somewhat blossom into a healthier hurricane, and we do expect that Laura will reach Category 2 hurricane intensity before it moves onshore somewhere along the Louisiana-Texas coastline. That's where the current path takes us. Anywhere from Vermilion Bay out to Galveston Bay is where we expect the center of the storm to pass. So just because you're not in this cone doesn't mean you wouldn't be impacted. A great example of that would be now with Marco. You see all those thunderstorms here on the infrared imagery. Folks along the Florida Peninsula have been impacted by storms sheared off away from the center of the storm. So keep in mind, the cone only accounts for the center of the storm, not all of the impacts you would see. And this track could change as we head into the next several hours, the next 12 to 24 hours. We could see some change on the current track. We do expect Laura to make landfall sometime on later part of Tuesday, heading on into the overnight on Thursday. That is the current track timing for that. So something that many folks here along the Gulf Coast have been concerned with earlier in the week was the prospect of having Marco and Laura move onshore. What impacts could they bring? How do you prepare for not just one, but two tropical systems in a short amount of time? Thankfully, Marco has been somewhat kind to folks along the Gulf Coast. Now we're preparing for Laura. So yesterday, I got the opportunity to speak to one of our partners from the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, Leslie Chapman Henderson, who gave us some great tips on how you can prepare your home in anticipation for these storms.
Are, believe it or not, still things you can do to keep your home safe. Look at your garage door, and if anything is loose on the mounting brackets or up around on the ceiling where the track is, get out your drill or a screwdriver and tighten everything up. A tube of caulk can help you if you can get in your attic and apply that caulk to the intersection of your roof deck and the trusses. All of these things are going to help protect you from, the high wind with the garage. 90% of the time when the house is damaged, it starts with the garage door because it's your largest and weakest opening. What does it affect? Your roof. So by putting that caulk on, you can get 3 times the strength against wind uplift from the storm. Everything that we have and that I'm talking about is available at hurricanestrong.org. And if you get stuck and you have questions, we have podcasts and we have checklists, and you can always email us as well.
So great tips that Leslie lent to us there. And, now is the time, crunch time, to get those preparations completed. Take some of those tips into account. Review your hurricane preparedness plan. That's something we spoke about in our hurricane special. Things you should have in your kit ready to go and something to prepare for. You should have that ready at the beginning of hurricane season so you don't have to worry about it. But now, especially for folks along the Gulf Coast where, quite frankly, it's crunch time. Laura is on the way, and it will have widespread impacts for folks along the Gulf Coast. You need to double check that kit and make sure you have everything you need. Make sure your whole family is on the same plan for what you will do to prepare ahead of Laura's landfall. Our very own storm chaser, Aaron Jajak, is in the area and will be helping us track this storm as it approaches the U.S. coastline. So we will be with you throughout this storm to help guide you through it and let you know what the latest is for folks here along the Gulf Coast as Laura approaches. Something else that we've been very concerned with and is frankly a very big concern for folks along the Louisiana coastline is storm surge. And so that has been probably the real threat with Marco that has kind of still stayed and remained, even though the storm is weakened, is that surf and those rough conditions that we showed you. But storm surge with Laura is not looking good for folks here from the panhandle of Mississippi, wrapping around Louisiana and out to Texas. Right now, just a storm surge watch in effect for folks here. But as we head on into tomorrow, I do expect that to be upgraded for a warning for certain areas. And right now, it's looking at like the National Hurricane Center is in particular concerned for folks anywhere from Vermilion Bay, which I'll point to is this body of water all the way out to High Island, Texas. We could see some very serious storm surge here, anywhere from 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. So that means the water coming up 7 to possibly 11 feet higher than it normally would meet the land. So that's a lot of water above where it should be. So very big concern for folks here. I'm sure many of the people who live in this area are no stranger to the kind of impacts that can be seen from storm surge. So definitely take those preparations into account now while you have the time, because as we move on here, Laura's going to make a pretty quick trek through the Gulf of Mexico. So that window to get prepared, we're coming upon it here, folks. You need to get to it and have your plan of action into play here. I'm going to show you through one of the models that I think last night was doing a much better job of getting a lock on Laura, and has kind of been the case today. This is our RPM model. It's a 4-kilometer resolution model that shows somewhat of a future radar, if you'd call it that. And I think it lines up really well with the National Hurricane Center's track. Of course, you don't just take one model into account, and that's certainly not what the National Hurricane Center is doing. They're taking several models into account and using the big brains over there at the National Hurricane Center to kind of squish out which scenarios would be most likely as we head on through today with the data that we have. So this is what it's looking like heading on into tonight and into the overnight. Laura clears Cuba, enters the Gulf of Mexico, very warm waters here. By tomorrow afternoon, we're likely to see a pretty well organized hurricane out in the Gulf of Mexico. Could see some more showers moving on from Florida all the way across the Gulf Coast, depending on the kind of banding that happens. We'll show you the steering currents that are influencing Laura's path here in a moment, but we're likely to see widespread showers across the Gulf Coast continuing into tomorrow, much like we saw today. Probably more shower coverage along the Texas coast versus the little bit of shower activity we saw today. So expect that to increase. And then watch as Laura moves along this course into the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, this future radar is a bit ominous. It shows that this is a hurricane that will quickly get its act together. You can see on this radar, it develops an eye. And of course, this is just one scenario, but so far it's done a decent job of somewhat illustrating and predicting the likelihood of these storms. So Laura, again, expected to be a Category 2 hurricane when it makes landfall here. So some of those impacts we can show you right here. Category 1 would put storm maximum sustained winds in a storm anywhere from 74 to 95 miles per hour, would produce some minor damage. Your power might go out. Storm surge for folks along the coast is a problem. But once we get into that Category 2 neighborhood, things get a bit more impressive. Your maximum sustained winds would be between 96 miles per hour to 110 miles per hour, and the National Hurricane Center's forecast now would put Laura at 105 mile per hour maximum sustained winds when it comes on shore. So that's where the forecast stands. So right smack dab in the middle of Category 2, or really on that higher end of Category 2, would produce extensive damage for some neighborhoods. Trees down, power lines down, power outages to be expected, could last up to a week. Those are some of the impacts that you could see here. And like we talked about earlier, the storm surge, a very big concern because of that vulnerable coastline, especially for Louisiana, even into parts of northern Texas coastline there, but definitely the coastline of Louisiana, those marshlands, very susceptible to storm surge and some of the damage there. So let's go into the upper air now and talk about some of what's influencing this storm. We'll show you the visible satellite imagery first to kind of get a lock on what's going on with the cloud structure of Laura, and even Marco. You can see what's left of it there moving across the southeast here. This is basically what's left of Marco's thunderstorms moving across the southeast, and look at how far that gets carried out there, gets picked up into the larger flow of things. But let's zoom in a little bit closer here and we'll show you Laura just here into the Caribbean. starting to make its approach into the Gulf of Mexico. So this is visible satellite imagery. This is basically looking through a picture right at the atmosphere. You see the texture of these clouds as the thunderstorms billow up. I like to compare it to watching a pot of water boil. You can see these thunderstorms begin to bubble up as they roll on through the afternoon here. This loop showing you we've got some healthy thunderstorms on the western side here of the circulation, especially on the western and into the southwestern side. Some thunderstorms wrapping on in here. We got some good looking fanning on the southern side of the storm, but we're meeting some trouble up on the northern side. Part of that is because of the land interaction. Part of that is because of the mechanism that's steering this storm, the Bermuda High or the Atlantic Ridge, that's got winds going this way and just kind of tearing off some of this moisture and some of these clouds and thunderstorms. So that's why it's been a pretty poor day weather-wise for folks in the Keys and along the southwest coastline of Florida, as we showed you in those surfline cameras earlier. So Laura is expected to continue to dance along the southern coastline of Cuba. Like I said, this is the Isle of Youth, and it's just been crossing by there. Now exiting over the water, going to clear that last tip of Cuba before making it into the Gulf of Mexico. And again, all of these waters here, very, very warm. And so tropical systems love that. They just take those warm waters, evaporate it out, that latent heat really fueling the storm, getting the circulation going. Got great exhaust above because we don't have much shear going on. In fact, it's probably going to really move into a more conducive environment as it rides along the ridge into the Gulf of Mexico here. So really not a lot working against Laura as it makes its approach into the Gulf of Mexico. So now let's show you water vapor. And this has been probably my favorite product to show folks what we're looking at when we consider the steering mechanisms that make these storms go here. The orange that you see in the darker shades of gray are dry air. The colorful bits, that's moisture, thunderstorms. You can actually see Laura pretty well right here, pretty obvious counterclockwise spin here just south of Cuba. And of course, here's the Gulf coastline right here. This is what's left of Marco and the moisture being funneled out towards the southeast. Notice we got this counterclockwise kind of spin going on here. Cut off low pressure system, and this is a trough of low pressure. So the general flow of wind is going this way and moving out across the southeast. So this is one mechanism. I'm going to take my arrows here and draw it for you. I think I'm actually going to move over just a bit and readjust. All right. So this is that trough of low pressure right here we've been talking about. Moving out abouts there. Forgive my lack of artistic abilities here, but that's about where that is. Counterclockwise motion here. Oh, I don't have my pointer, so you can't see where I'm pointing. Counterclockwise spin here, low pressure. All right, on the other side of this ring here, high pressure, the Bermuda High, the Atlantic Ridge, whatever name you want to give it. It's building in this way, moving closer to the U.S., and with it, that steering mechanism. So high pressure counterclockwise movement of winds over here. So this is the periphery of the ridge that Laura has been riding on its track through the Caribbean and has been taking it so close to the Greater Antilles, across Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba most recently. And so now it's starting to break off into the Gulf of Mexico. This is going to continue to chart Laura along that northwesterly path, and it's going to be attracted to this trough of low pressure over here. But this is the window that we're working with right here along the Louisiana and Texas coastlines. Of course, this isn't where these two systems will be tomorrow. The atmosphere is always in motion, but these are generally the steering currents that the storm has to kind of chart it along. Notice in the Gulf of Mexico, not a whole lot going on here, so not a lot to disturb Laura in the atmosphere. Of course, water vapor is the top part of the atmosphere. So we're dealing with the upper third, looking from the top down. This is where we look for shear or exhaust or things that hurt the storm's exhaust. So not a lot is going to be working against Laura as it makes its way into the Gulf of Mexico. Nothing to really disrupt the circulation in this upper portion of the atmosphere. But this is why it's taking that path that you see, and then once it comes on shore, quickly jutting out, making that right turn across perhaps portions of Arkansas, Tennessee, and making its way out to the coastline, because this trough is not going to let it go any further to the west. So folks in the middle of Texas, say San Antonio, Austin, all the way up through Dallas, I'm not sure you really get too much rainfall from this system as it moves closer. A lot of that rain will be pinned mostly to the coastline, but definitely as the storm makes its way inland, folks across northern portions of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas, you could see some heavy rainfall from that. The jury's still out on that, a couple days away, so we can't say exactly who will get rain, who won't get rain, what kinds of impacts, but as of right now, that's the way that things are beginning to look with the setup that we have. So for that reason, that's where the forecast stands. That's where the National Hurricane Center has been charting their course, because we have a lot of data going into this. Over the weekend, National Weather Service offices around the Gulf coastline began doing extra sounding. So they do these soundings that take samples of the atmosphere. They literally tie a box of instruments to a balloon and release it up to the atmosphere so they can track the conditions that are going on, and that gives them a profile of the atmosphere. So a bunch of these offices, instead of doing their normal 2 balloon launches a day, morning and evening, have been doing 4 a day. So we get that extra one in the afternoon, an extra one in the early morning. So it gives us a really better resolution picture, if you will, of what's going on in the atmosphere, and helps us chart out some of these steering mechanisms and in the end make a better forecast for the track. In terms of intensity and things like that, hurricane hunters have been very busy. They've been flying flights around the clock into both of these storms all weekend long, and been very busy looking into Laura. The benefit of having the storm near the landmass of Cuba and the islands it's come across is that we get some radar data that helps show the inner workings of the storm. When the models can lock on to a good idea of the center, they do a better job of producing the forecast. So we could see this track change because Laura's center has been disrupted by the island of Cuba as it's interacted with the land a little bit. So as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico going on into tomorrow, once again we could see track changes as that better formulated center begins to ingest into the model. So lots of things to consider here. And one more thing that helps with the data is all the oil rigs that are out in the Gulf Coast and the buoys that take surface observations. That goes into the forecast as well. So that really rounds out the pie here when it comes to tracking the forecast for Laura. And we're especially concerned now because it looks like not a lot will be working against this storm to hinder it or weaken it in any kind of way. So that's why all eyes are on the Gulf now that we've kind of made it through the first step with Marco, and we've done pretty well with that. Some heavy downpours, some strong thunderstorms, and some rough seas, but eventually weakening to just holding on to tropical storm strength. That's the best case scenario when it comes to the tropics. So now we got our breather, got to get ready for Laura as it approaches here into the next couple of days. Again, on the current forecast track, looking like it's going to make a landfall somewhere along the Louisiana or Texas coastline late Wednesday evening, possibly the wee hours of the morning on Thursday. And of course, myself, meteorologist Mike Linden, chief meteorologist Leslie Hudson will be here to walk you through this with live updates. We are going to be on this storm for the rest of the week to keep you up to date with what's going on. And of course, your regular forecast, the fast forecast that comes out every day, we wouldn't miss it for you guys. We got that coming for you too. So stay tuned. We'll do another live update later on this evening once we get more of the information coming out from these systems to give you the latest information on what's going on with Laura. And don't forget, download the MyRadar app and you can track along with us. You'll get those notifications. And hey, if you're not in the Gulf Coast area where this storm is expected to approach, well, you can track the weather where you are or just nerd out with us and make the best of this situation. Okay, guys, that's going to be enough from me tonight. We'll be back here in a little bit to bring you more information. For now, stay safe, and we'll catch you back here soon.